I'm David Jedynak. I'm the Chief Technology Officer from Curtiss-Wright. I know some of you in the room, and some of you, it's the first time we're meeting. What I want to talk about is less about technology and more about business. So last year at ETT, Ben Petticord from US Army CERDEC got up and talked about something called MORA, or Hardware Software Convergence effort coming out of US Army CERDEC. That's a R&D branch of the Communications Electronics Group within US Army. And they talked about this big plan to make a board and backplane standard that we'd be able to put lots of different radio, software-defined radio and RF tuners and single board computers into this box that would be a lot easier on the vehicle. Instead of having here's a radio, here's a radio, here's a radio, all these stovepipe systems, it would be this nice big chassis and they drop cards in and it would be this great, wonderful thing. They didn't know a few years ago what VPX was. And now, and I'll make the comment here that it's important, they didn't know what it was, and now they're members of the board of VITA. And that's kind of my big story here, getting our customer to be a part of our community to help grow our community. So anyway, so they put up this chart, multiple phases, et cetera. We're coming up on more demos that they've already done. The demos previously, there's new ones coming up in phase 2. This is an eye chart. It's a standard government chart. It's an eye chart. So what really matters is the fact that phase 2 is roughly where we are now, and they're going to have vehicle demos with VPX cards in VPX chassis this fall, and then keep going from there. And what is MORA? At the end of the day, modular open RF architecture. It's analog RF or digital RF using VITA-49, going over various communication buses. It uses something called Victory, which is another Army standard, vehicular integration for C4ISR EW interoperability. Say that a bunch of times fast. That's used for messaging. It uses OpenVPX for the blades. They've been trying to figure out how to do this for a number of years, and they finally settled in on what we're doing here as part of this community. So why is this important? And this is stepping back from the technology. MORA, it's great, it's going to be wonderful. What's really important here is at the end of the day, in the aerospace and defense market, especially I'm going to focus in on the defense market, who is our customer really? Those of us in the room that are what we'd call tier 3 or tier 2, we look upwards and we see big companies and we think that's our customer. At the end of the day though, they don't control the funding. They don't have the budget line items and the programs of record. And what's interesting is that used to not matter because they were the systems engineers. Well, in 2009, there was first bill of a new presidency. It was unanimous, House and Senate passed, called the Weapons Systems Acquisition Reform Act of 2009. I read the whole thing, it was 30 pages. One of the biggest things that it did, it elevated systems engineering to, I think, a Deputy Secretary of Defense level. Systems engineering, which meant the government acquisition folks needed to know what it was that they were buying. It used to be we'd buy a box, a line replaceable unit, right? It was just a box and it did its thing and you'd get it from the prime or whoever below it and you really didn't care what they did inside. And now it's a modular open system and all these engineers, and typically they're engineers that are in their 20s and their 30s and they're coming from a maker sort of world and they're used to doing Raspberry Pis and Arduinos and whatnot, and they're going, hey, what's in that box? How is that all put together? They want to know. They're driving that. It's a big shift in who really our customer is. Our customer is now truly the government acquisition folks. There's two different areas here that we need to understand. There's the R&D guys and then there's the acquisition guys. They're different commands. It's the way things are structured. If it's in the Army, it's one way. If it's in the Navy, it's another way. But ultimately, there's guys that go tinker and come up with stuff, R&D, and then there's folks who acquire. So when we look at buying decisions in the defense market, and a bit of an eye chart doesn't really matter. The point is we go from a capability. The weapons platform needs to do this. And then they do an analysis of alternatives and they come up with some platforms and systems that could do that, and then they keep driving those things down to lower and lower levels to here's a box that needs to do this. And it used to kind of stop there. And now with things like MORA, they're saying, well, how is it designed internally? What sorts of things should we do? I heard a a comment earlier from my colleague from Artisan about ATCA being selected by the Navy for a certain type of system. I believe it was probably below decks type systems where that made sense. In the rugged ground market, air market, et cetera, VPX makes a lot of sense. So when they look at analysis of alternatives, that's where we went. So what's critical about this? When we look at the technology that we have in the VITA community, things like VPX, and we look at the market that we're in, are we aligning our goals? You can look at, well, there's all these commercial technologies out there, why don't they use this one, that one, or the other one? Well, let's make sure we're aligned. You don't necessarily want to go and use offshore manufactured stuff for telecom racks when you're worried about the walled garden of defense, which is, okay, we've got ITAR restrictions, we might have to deal with various protection of critical program information. You may need to look at things like supply chain, you may need to look at things like serviceability, et cetera. Sometimes it's also just volumes. So when you look at a big defense program, you sell 300 of a particular box or 300 of a particular blade, that's a big sale. If you go to a telecom type market, they're going to laugh at you and say, wait, is this just for prototypes or samples? So you got to understand that the ecosystem that we're in, there's got to be an alignment. We build rugged to start with. We understand all the concerns about various regulatory things and acquisition rules and shock and vibe and the temperature ranges and conformal coding, and who cares about lead-free right now? Well, all of them do, and there's lots of FUD about lead-free, and so we have to deal with all of those different things and approach it with that market. So that's one of the big alignments here is in the defense market, folks who are in defense understand how to deal with all the perceptions in that market, which brings me to sort of my next point. When you align those perceptions, there's a lot of stakeholders. There's lots of eyes. And one of the big issues that we run into in defense is one, or really anywhere, but in defense in particular, one failure outweighs a lot of success. One of the, oh, whoops, outweighs a lot of attaboys, right? We've all dealt with that in work one way or another, but in defense, it's really bad. So if something fails, it takes a lot of work to overcome that. Most folks in other industries won't do that. The VITA community, given the fact that many of us are in defense or aerospace or safety critical one way or another, we understand the importance of providing the right messages, the right things about the technology, the right dotting of I's and crossing of T's to make sure that the customer who's ultimately going to buy from us understands that we understand what's important to them. And then that's one of the last things, aligning incentives. So this is sort of a little epiphany breakthrough. One of the things all of us in here that are commercial understand is return on investment. We put dollars in, R&D dollars in, and we're supposed to get a product out at the end of the day that we go sell, and we get more money back than we put in the first place. Pretty simple. When you look at the government, they're not measured that way at all. When you look at the government folks, when I look at my colleagues, so like Ben Petticord, who stood up here last year and talked about MORA, how is he measured? This comes down to people. How is he measured? How is that group of people measured? How are those tax dollars being spent measured? At the end of the day, it's technology successfully transitioned to the warfighter. And that's how those guys measure ROI. They put tax dollars in, and at the end of the day, something was fielded, and it was part of our systems. And hopefully it saved a life, or it helped us win, or whatever it is, but the point is we transitioned it. Aligning those things together is where we get success. So back to the title of the talk, MORA, where are we today? Well, here's the point. It isn't so much about the technology. There's demos, there's stuff going on. We're doing briefs. Greg here has done a huge amount of work in supporting that entire team, in creating backplane profiles, et cetera. But here's the thing. In 2013, there was no board and backplane standard for U.S. Army CCOM. All the communication equipment, all the radios, all that stuff would just show up. Here's a box, here's a box, here's a box, here's a box. There'd be no room for warfighters, no room for bullets, no room for water on a platform because it was all filled with radios. Interestingly, the ground guys, so tank Automotive Command, so TACOM, and TARDEC, Tank Automotive Research and Development, they already knew about all this stuff. They'd already been using it because part of Future Combat Systems years ago was VPX. And in fact, VPX is spec'd out in various architecture descriptions in that community. They already knew about it. And like I said, there was all the stovepipe equipment coming from CCOM saying, here, put this on your tank. There's no room for anything. Truly, huge problem. And it's many years of CCOM via the folks at CERDEC across all these different directorates looking for a standard to bring all this stuff together and make it work. I sat for probably 2011, 2012, and then finally 2013 was the last time I saw a slide that looked like there's a little corner, a little chassis in a corner there. It says OpenVPX chassis. It actually isn't, but it was the chassis they kept putting up on these PowerPoints saying, someday we'll have this great architecture with a bunch of boards that go in a backplane and a chassis, and this will all be solved. So I saw that presented for 3 years at various systems engineering conferences, and they couldn't find it. We presented in 2014, some of us from CW, from Curtiss-Wright, who are also members of VITA organization, we presented it to those folks. Shortly thereafter, I think they got a free membership, trial membership to VITA, and started writing the standards. So where are we now? So U.S. Army CERDEC is a member of the board of VITA. They're working with other DoD agencies, other folks, including folks like the NSA. They're creating profiles. They're putting out RFIs. They're looking for feedback. They're putting out RFQs for hardware. That was just last week something came out. They're heading to a demo on a vehicle. They're transitioning. This is the single biggest thing. So I talked about all of this. The R&D guys go off and they do things, and that's great, and eventually somebody has to buy it. So the big deal is at the end of this past year, the community of command, the folks, the PEOs and the PMs, program executive offices and the program managers within CCOM, the folks that actually buy the equipment, have programs of record that come down from Congress all the way from the top, they are starting to participate and fund and ask questions and whatnot. And then, of course, the funniest thing is those folks are worried about going and taking this newfangled OpenVPX thing and introducing it back to the ground guys who've already been using it for quite a few years. So it's one of the things about government acquisition. Sometimes people aren't talking to each other. The point of all of this, again, is we can talk about all of these wonderful technologies. If our customers don't want it, or they don't know about it, or they don't know how to spec it, or they don't know how to understand it, or understand the risk of it, or whatnot, they're not going to buy it. So to me, one of the most important things that's happened is that we finally have our buying customer as a member of our family, as a member of our community of interest, speccing out the stuff that we're doing. So that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about. I didn't really want to talk tech. I just wanted to talk about the business. Let's make sure the technical solutions are actually purchasable. So with that, questions?